Hey IT friends, how you doing? This is our second video in our onboarding series. And today we're going to talk a little bit about some things that really happen before your onboarding, but they really set you up to have the best possible onboarding you can. So I'm going to guess that most of you have some sort of sales process you follow. And that sales process likely has some sort of marketing, followed by some sort of qualification. There's some initial call or appointment. And eventually you get to the point where whoever's doing your sales, that might be owner-led sales, that might be a salesperson, is doing their discovery call. It's that thing where, you ask what their pain points are, what their business need is, their budget, all that stuff. I'm not an expert in that. Alex Farling is. You should totally go check out the content they're putting out on Empath around the sales process. It's really cool. They're doing a AMA every month. So along that sales process, maybe during your discovery questions or maybe as a separate appointment, you likely have some sort of technical discovery where either you or a technical employee comes in and does something to, at some level, assess kind of what you're getting yourselves into. It's pretty common that we do this. A long time tool that many of us have used for this is rapid fire tools. There are other options, but yada yada, it's something that we do. What I would argue is that during this technical discovery, you have an amazing opportunity to basically go in and pull all the information you need to figure out approximately what's going to be involved in the onboarding. And this is the part that gets me really excited. I bet you have standards, right? Minimum standards, some sort of stack alignment. There's every MSP does at this point. This technical discovery opportunity gives you the ability to propose a minimum standards compliance project before you onboard the client. So we're going to talk about that today. So if you've never actually done this, which I doubt, because if you're watching these videos, you probably are or work for or work with MSPs. But if you've never done a technical discovery, I want to kind of quickly go over what you should be looking for at a very high level. The idea is you're going into a client or a prospect, really. You're going to a prospect and you're trying to assess their level of technical debt. So that's how many problems they've put off fixing. And you're also doing an assessment of sort of your liability in the current state of their equipment, both so that you can accurately put together a sales proposal for them, whether that's by user or by device or by environment, but also so that you just have some sort of idea if this client is even someone you can support. There are tools that can automate this, like we talked about, like rapid fire tools. There are software tools you can buy that'll give you a framework to do it around. There's really no one right way to do your technical discovery, but that's what it is. And that's the point of it during this process. So I want to offer up a thought that you probably shouldn't be trying to do your technical discovery if you're also the person who's doing the sales discovery questions. If for no other reason than, since most of us, that's owner-led sales, you don't want to set the idea that the owner's the one crawling under desks to fix things. Whether or not that's actually the truth, you just don't want to set that up initially from the sales perspective, because you're the forever tech at that point. That aside, and I'm just going to assume that you have another body that can come with you that can do the technical part. You want to have them do a little more than just run rapid fire tools. You want to have them look at the entire environment for your minimum standards compliance as an MSP. Whatever your ticket to ride is, that you will not take a client if they don't meet that bare minimum requirement. You want to have them audit that while they're doing that technical discovery. And in a lot of cases, this isn't very time consuming. You can do a lot of this with just good observational skills and a camera, and you can look at the photos later. But I'll give you some examples of what we did at my MSP, if that helps. So I didn't want to take a client that didn't have a supportable edge device or firewall. I didn't want to take a client that didn't have a switch I could manage remotely and didn't have wiring that was labeled. I didn't want to take a client that didn't have power protection that was on all of their core infrastructure, both networking and any sort of servers. I didn't want to take on any sort of client that had a critical business process that relied on a single piece of technology that there was no meat space failover for. So if there was the machine that did the thing, and that machine only had one PC hooked up to it, and if that PC went down, the entire business went down. I don't want that. So I want to look for things like that during the technical discovery, which is a very, very low level thing to do. It's mostly common sense, taking pictures, documenting what's happening. Maybe you grab a few serial numbers or MAC addresses to check warranties, and you kind of go through and just get as much information as you can. It's why I suggest taking pictures of everything possible, because you can look at pictures later to pick up on stuff you didn't see before. While you're in there doing that, also take a look and just sort of see how clean and or shabby is the condition of the technology that's there, because that can give you a lot of really interesting information about how the client values and spends money, which you can use later. But you go through this discovery with this eye of what are all of these potential points that don't meet my minimum standards. And you keep it at that high level. I don't need to know specifically, at my MSP, we only support this particular version of Windows 10, and this one computer wasn't patch compliant. We'll address that later. I'm not talking about that level of detail. I mean at a much grander level. If you were going to propose a project to remediate the absolute I will not take you on as a client things, what would those items be? You want to collect all that during your technical discovery. So you've collected all of this information. You've figured out which of your standards they don't meet, which of your standards they might meet, what you can support, what you can't support, the whole thing. Maybe you're putting together a report using the tool like Rapid Fire Tools to build some sort of book you're going to give to the client. Maybe you don't. There's different schools of thought on that. Both are honestly quite valid. But here's what you want to do with that. You don't just want to, at this point, kick that off to the sales team to use to create their pricing. You want to take that and look at that based on your judgment call as that executive at an MSP who's going to have to service this client, and figure out, based on what I've seen, what needs to change before I can even begin to install my tools and my support stack to have an opportunity to service this client. And you want to make a list. And as you go through that list, make it one time, you want to go back and look at that list and be like, what's everything on here that only I care about and the client is never going to care about? You want to cross that stuff off the list. And you want to get down to only those few items that are incredibly important to you and serve an important business need or risk or pain point to the client. That's your remediation plan. And you want to put that together so you can show the client before you get to the point of having agreed to services in an onboarding. In order for you to be able to consume our services appropriately, I need you to fix these things. I'm not going to fix them during the onboarding, because that's not the point of the onboarding. An onboarding is there to onboard you onto my services, not to right size and remediate your environment. And it's very important you draw that distinction early on, because that's what's going to allow you, first of all, to sound different than your competition, but secondly, to really differentiate the point of the onboarding. And like we talked about in the last video about bookending it, it's going to help you set up this idea that actual support, good support, doesn't start till after the onboarding. So there's a couple of interesting little things you can do with this remediation project if you've gone this route. Whether or not you choose to make it an actual barrier to having them sign up for their agreement, which is my preference, but you got to do what you got to do to get your clients. You can HOS it. You can include it, therefore, in the monthly cost. Hey, if you sign up now for this one monthly fee, we'll fix all this stuff before we even get started. However you want to skin that cat, and there's a lot of ways that we could talk about that. Use that as a tool to set the client expectation up front. Their environment isn't fit for you to support. And the point of the onboarding isn't to make it fit for you to support. if they choose not to address that fitness, they're going to have a bad time. And that bookending you gave them before, maybe you said it's going to be a 4-week onboarding. Listen, client, based on what we've seen, based on the things that would need to be repaired for you to have the best possible experience at our MSP, you're looking at more like a 2-month onboarding. And this is what we're going to estimate our support fees are. It's higher. We're going to actually charge you more because you're not in a position where we can give you the best support we can offer. And we really don't want to be in that position. It allows you to have this entire conversation with the client up front. So a natural question that the client is probably going to ask when you have this conversation is, you're telling me I need to do these things to be eligible to use your services. What's the point of an onboarding? And you kind of want that question to come up because it helps you differentiate what the purpose of an onboarding is. Remember, an onboarding is not there for you to remediate their environment. An onboarding is there for you to bring the client to a point where your team is able to render support to whatever they have. It's also the period of time when you unwind what the previous provider was doing. That's why onboardings typically have a lot of slop, a lot of sloppy support, because kind of no one can support the client during the onboarding. And so when they ask you that question, you're able to explain this ahead of time. Listen, during the onboarding period, you have a provider currently. We're slowly going to remove their tools and their ability to meet their contractual obligations to you. Their service level is going to degrade. At the same time, we're slowly going to be adding our tools to your environment, and our level to ability to support you is slowly going to increase. But until we get to a point where we have fully onboarded you in our systems, both parties, the exiting MSP and us, are not really going to be best equipped to provide you with the level of support that you've been accustomed to or will become accustomed to. And I need you to understand that before we go any further, because I don't want you to think that the minute that you sign this agreement, you're going to get fully onboarded level of support from the beginning. You will not. We need to plan this. We're going to plan it with your exiting provider. We're going to plan it with you. And if you're not ready to make this decision and plan this, we should wait until you are. I believe my sales guy told you that we only have 2 onboarding slots a month on the 1st or the 15th. That may mean that we don't plan your onboarding for this month and we plan it for next month. But that's the value you're going to get out of working with us. We're a partner. We really value your strategic business needs. We're not just here to plug holes and apply patches to the computer. That's a really powerful way to describe your initial experience with the client. The other thing you're doing there, and this is something I picked up a long time ago when I used to sell home theater systems. If you tell somebody about an experience they're going to have before they have it, and you explain to them the highs and lows of that experience ahead of time, when they experience those highs and lows, first of all, you're going to look very credible. But secondly, they're going to be saying, hey, Dean told me that support was going to degrade, and it is. He's smart. I made the right decision to trust him. At the end of the onboarding experience, when you QC your onboarding, when you have maybe an account manager go over how the onboarding went, it allows them to say, hey, remember when we told you up front that you were going to experience these things? Did you experience them? You did. How did you feel that we did handling them? Totally different framework for that conversation than simply, hey, what'd you think of our onboarding? That dovetails really nicely into them being able to ask them for a recommendation or a referral. But we'll talk about that in another video. So I want to deviate quickly and just go back to what we were talking about before. Having pre-onboarding minimum standards and positioning that as a product ahead of time can be a really powerful tool to add value to the entire onboarding experience. And I'm a big fan that the initial period when you bring on a client should be profitable as quickly as possible. You shouldn't be waiting months to regain profitability. The more you can align their environment to meet your ability to deliver the best version of your services up front, the quicker when you start supporting them, you'll immediately have a profitable, happy relationship. Ideally, in the first month, you'll be at an efficiency point where you're over that like 1.2 mark for efficiency that we're all striving for. The easiest way to do this is with setting those standards ahead of doing any other work. The other reason why I'm a big fan of that, most of you are going to be uncomfortable charging a fair market value for the work you're naturally going to do during your onboarding, because you're going to sell out of your own pocket and you're going to feel, I'm installing my tools and I'm documenting their system for me. I don't feel very comfortable about charging them for that. And I could go on a whole separate speech about why you should totally feel comfortable charging them, but I accept a lot of people feel that way. You probably don't feel that way about unracking and redoing their firewalls and networking and cabling and all of that. That's real work. If you can do that and charge appropriately for it at the beginning, not only does the client get something they can see right away, and remember, a lot of what we do at MSP is very esoteric and isn't something that's visible. I can see a refresh network closet. I can see brand new wiring. I can see new switches. I can see up-to-date access points. I can see things being labeled. That's all tangible. Right away, you give them a tangible product that they have in their hands. That's really rewarding early on in the engagement, because you're letting them know right away, I made a good decision by hiring these people. They actually did something. And yeah, we can go down a path of you don't want to solve too much pain until you get into the actual support part of the relationship, because you don't want them to back out, which is why I love the idea of you do this pre-onboarding project to bring them up to your minimum compliance standards as a deliverable, and you build it into the agreement pricing. And then I'm not really as opposed anymore to you using the onboarding as a loss leader or some other sort of nonsense term, because most of the sting that you're going to be putting into the onboarding, you've already taken out through a paid project. Housing this project is a fantastic idea. And if you're uncomfortable with housing, there are fantastic industry partners. I had a lot of success with Great America Leasing. That can be a really great way to do it. You turn a CapEx into an OpEx, however you want to skin that cat. But I just wanted to offer that quickly on this onboarding video, that I think there's a lot of value to coming in and just delivering them a complete minimum standards remediation before you get in and do anything else. It's impressive as hell. It gives them something they can see. Incidentally, it totally removes the need for having the old provider being able to tell you how to get into anything, because who cares? We just redid it on our own. I don't care what the login was to the old firewall that was there. I don't care, what the profiles were on that ancient Cisco SG switch. I don't care. I ripped it out. I threw it out. I redid it myself the way I want it done. Yay me. And I made some documentation on it for the client so that they have an idea of how it all works, which is super sticky. All right. So I've talked your ear off enough about this. What do I want you to do going forward? So going forward, few things I'd like you to either change or start doing if you're not doing them. When you get to the part of your sales process where you're doing your discovery call with the owner or the sales executive, if you're currently having that person also do the technical discovery, consider modifying that and bringing along someone else to do the technical discovery part. You'll thank me later, and that's a really easy, small maturity step to take. Really try and holistically do that technical discovery and take photos of everything. Look for things in their environment that reflect technical debt that don't meet your minimum standards for the best version of your support. Once you put together that technical discovery report, don't just hand that to the sales team to come up with pricing. Use it to build out a project that would bring the client up to whatever your bare minimum standards are. And then once you've done that, use that project as a sales tool to not only add value to the onboarding, but to also explain to the client why the onboarding isn't when support's going to start and why it'll be a little bit rough no matter who their provider is. And finally, if you can, and I highly suggest you try, use that initial project as a way to start driving profitability from day one. You might think your clients will object. I think you'd be surprised how many won't. It's pretty cool to have brand new stuff that works well that's clean and well documented before you've had to pay anybody to do a bunch of stuff they don't understand at all. It's kind of cool. Other industries do it. You should too. Have a great day, everybody, and absolutely start kicking some butt on your onboarding discovery calls.